I've learned whilst living in Portugal that this country has no shortage of wonders, but out of all my explorations so far, perhaps none could come close to the thrilling, exhilarating beauty of these islands, sitting in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. For years, I've been dreaming of getting to this place, and recently I've finally set foot and witnessed this spectacle with my own eyes. Being here truly feels like a reward. This archipelago born from water and fire and the showdown of elements. Islands that are teeming with wealth of nature, breathtaking landscapes and sceneries that are a gift to this world. Plus, there's a winemaking tradition that would make any wine lover swoon. Any adventurer would call this love at first sight, and the rest of us would simply call it Azores. Previously on In the Mood for Azores, we explored São Miguel, the exquisitely green island where we experienced the city of Ponta Delgada, the geothermal offerings of Furnas, and the majestic panoramas of Sete Cidades. And on the second leg of our trip, we headed to the mountain island of Pico. As soon as a plane approaches this part of Azores, you'll notice immediately this island wears the volcano like a crown, and the terrain below is noticeably different, a lot more rugged and darker, as though scorched by blackened earth. Pico is the youngest of all the islands in Azores, at approximately 300,000 years old compared to his million-years-old siblings. There are actually more than 200 volcanoes in this island, and the one that rises above them all is Mount Pico, this cone-shaped stratovolcano. This makes Pico the most volcanic island in the Azorean archipelago, and therefore dominating the nature and way of life in this unique island. During our time on this island, we stayed in São Mateus, this tranquil seaside haven, just a 20-minute drive from Madalena, the capital of Pico Island. Driving to this location alone, we could already feel the absolute silence and tranquility of this island, and that goes with safety too. We were told by our hosts that this is one of the few places in the world where you can still leave your front door open, keys on the latch, without any worry. That's how peaceful and safe this island is. As soon as we've settled, not for long, we headed to Madalena to explore the place. Madalena is a pleasant little seaside town, made even more scenic with a volcanic mountain in the backdrop. Just off the coasts are two islets, Deitado and Empe, remnants of a volcanic memory, and beyond you can see the island of Faial. In this serene town you can go for great walks along the coast, or swim in the natural ocean pools around the area. In Pico you can eat wonderfully well too. The island is rich with seafood gastronomy, and in Madalena, I highly recommend the following 3 restaurants. First is O Ancoradouro, this spacious and bright modern space by the sea, with a great view of Faial Island. This place offers some authentic Pico cuisine, and here we tasted local sausages, and then indulged in caldo de peixe, this massive fish stew dish that's local to the island. Careful with the portions though. We ordered for 2, and what we got was good enough for 4. Paired with a local Pico rosé, I say this makes for an excellent lunch. We also went to Atasca ou Petisca, another favorite, a traditional Portuguese affair that serves great seafood and grill. The slipper lobster was an absolute standout here. Lastly, you have Salabar, this modern architectural piece standing at the edge of the sea, curvilinear structure that's refreshingly different from any other place here. It's both a bar and restaurant, a place to drink some of the best Pico wines while staring out to the sea, preferably in a sunset, as the sound of the Atlantic waves washing those worries away. As we very well know, Pico is dominated by a volcanic mountain, so we went to explore the very genesis of this island, Mount Pico itself. Montanha do Pico is known as the highest mountain of all Portugal, both in the continent and the islands. The highest peak rises over 2,351 meters above sea level, and is the 3rd largest volcano of the Atlantic. It last erupted in the 18th century, and it's been dormant ever since. We began our ascent in the mountain in a beautiful morning, and we couldn't help but stop intermittently to walk and explore and gaze at cows and the views around. But with the classic Azorean weather, halfway through, the weather changed. We made it to Casa de Montanha, where naturally the hike to the Pico mountain trail begins. Here, everything became foggy and covered with clouds, so we had to abandon this hiking plan. We drove back down to the mountain base, was stopped by an herd of cows on the way down, and eventually went to a place where no weather can affect our itinerary in Pico. Grutas das Torres, a cave network located underneath this volcanic island that started as one of the longest lava caves in the world, extending to over 3 miles long. We went here for a guided tour to understand and experience the volcanology of Pico, how these underground magma rivers have created tunnels deep within the earth. This was quite a memorable experience, seeing all the hardened lava and their formations, the stalactites, stalagmites, and lava walls glimmering from what little light that shone from an overwhelming darkness. To remind us further how truly young this island is, we headed to Cachorro, in the northwest side of Pico, to see some of the rawest side of the island at its most fledgling form. Some of these rocks in Pico are less than 1,000 years old. That's practically youth in geological terms. Pico is often referred to as a black island, and it's easy to see why. The land here is hardened lava, and that goes with all the soil and the rocks, used in nearly every aspect of lifestyle, architecture, and perhaps the island's most outstanding life-giving creation, winemaking. There's an adage in this island that says, "From rocks we made wine." For to tell the story of Pico is to tell the story of wine. This is both the heart and the lifeblood of this island. To understand the depth and the importance of wine here, we had to go to Criação Velha, or so-called the Old Creation, where Pico's viticulture flourished. This spectacular landscape is clear evidence of the sheer effort of the people of Pico to create something miraculous out of lava rocks. This is a testament to over 500 years of vineyard culture that's unique to this island, unlike anywhere else in the world, that it's now protected as UNESCO World Heritage Site. That makes Pico the second wine region in Portugal to be preserved as a heritage site, along with the Douro Valley. One can only imagine the arduous difficulty in growing anything, let alone the cultivation of grapevines, and the locals here use the lava rocks to build walls on rectangular plots called corrais, to protect the vines from harsh sea winds and ocean spray, and to keep the warmth within the plots. And the result? This vast labyrinth of walls and these lava fields produce some of the most extraordinary wines in the world. Pico wine is an Azorean treasure, and we are fortunate to have it today. To understand more of the history of winemaking in this island, we went to Museu do Vinho, or Pico Wine Museum, housed in a former Carmelite convent with its own facility of winemaking. We learned that grapes were first cultivated in this island in the 15th century by a Franciscan friar, Fray Gigante, and it was a grape variety of Verdelho that were first implanted here. Pico then reached its golden age during the 17th century, when Pico became popular in the Americas, and even in the gilded tables of the Tsars of Russia. However, the vineyards of Pico were decimated due to the phylloxera plague in the 19th century, and viticulture in this island only really recovered in the 20th century, and that recovery continues until today. A trip to Pico is unimaginable without visiting the unique vineyards here and tasting the delicious wines on offer on this island. With Salvador Sommelier on our lead, we were graciously invited to a Cerca dos Frades. Located in Legido de Santa Luzia, with the breathtaking spread of the iconic lava walls and with a close proximity to the sea, this winery has only recently started producing this brand in 2018, and to a marvelous effect. This winery is owned by the incredibly welcoming Tito Silva, who showed us his vineyards and helped us understand the depth of Pico wines. Winemaking here is a legacy handed down through generations. As Tito told us, he inherited his land from his grandfather, along with a winemaking tradition. He rapturously shares to us a story where the name Cerca dos Frades comes from. which literally means friar's enclosure. This refers to the great stone fence and plot of land that friars once cleverly claimed as an area the size of an ox's skin, and then succeedingly and cunningly measured the size of the land using strips of the skin to form a long cord like a tape measure. As the story goes, the friars succeeded. The wines here are the result of an adventure of a collaboration between three close friends, including the winemakers Paulo Machado of Insular Wines and Fortunato Garcia of Czar Wines. And these wines, as attested by our wine expert Salvador, are compelling, embodying expressions of what makes Pico absolutely extraordinary. The first we tasted was a blend of three native Azorean grapes, Arinto from Açores, Terrantesh and Verdelho from this island. Then we proceeded to taste the monovarietals of Verdelho, recovered and replanted on this island, and Terrantesh do Pico, a hybrid of the Verdelho and Bastardo grape variety. I asked Salvador if he could pick a favorite bottle of wine here, which one would it be? He said it's Terrantesh do Pico.
Comparative to the other wines, this is absolutely immediately salty than the others, and this is a bit more fatty. You have like this grapefruit and panettone. It's a bit more elegant to drink than Verdun.
These wines are full of life, highly influenced by the salty sea, the freshness of the ocean, and the rich minerality of the volcanic soil, filling your mouth with sensations, the aroma of fruits with great acidity and quality. The exotic, thrilling nature of these wines are what defines Pico Island, both celebrated for its winemaking and for the glorious character that each bottle possesses. The depth of Pico wines goes beyond the scope of history and the significance of this island. For a small island, Pico has managed to conquer the global winemaking stage. The wines here were, and still are, highly sought after. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Pico wines were expensive and some of its greatest clients were the Russian royalty. That by the end of the 20th century, during the Bolshevik Revolution, this licorice Pico wine was found in the cellars of the last Tsar of Russia, Nicholas II. Thus, we had to seek out and visit the producer of one of the most unique wines in the world, Tsar, named as the Impossible Wine. We were cheerfully hosted by the charming and ebullient Fortunato Garcia. As the owner and producer of Czar Wine, served on the tables of czars and kings, the Vatican table, mentioned in Tolstoy's literary War and Peace, a wine that's auctioned by Sotheby's and sold to the world's wealthy, Fortunato maintains to be unassuming, good-natured, and incredibly well-spoken. He offered his time, sat down, and had a conversation with us. He says he owes this from his father, who saved the production of the Passado wine.
My dad comes to Pico after taking his course of teaching, and he goes teaching in Criação Velha in the beginning of the 60s. And this older teacher that owned a 3-acre vineyard, which was huge in Criação Velha, and understanding that that part of the island belonged to the lords of Fayal. But after the plagues, they sold it back to us. We started buying back our own land, but we could not afford the big pieces that they own. So Criação Velha became divided in chunks. And owning a 3-acre vineyard was a big chunk. This old teacher, seeing that my dad was very curious about winemaking, one day he turns to my dad and he goes, "You know, Jose, I'm going to offer you my vineyard because none of my kids are going to continue to do this. And this wine," and we're talking about the Passado wine, "is about to disappear." So we didn't disappear with the plagues, because we replanted and we start doing it again, but now it's about to disappear. And why? Everybody in Criação Velha was taking down Verdelho, the main grape. So the Verdelho is the father of the mother of the other two, Arinto dos Açores and Terrantesh do Pico, right? And so everybody was taking down Verdelho because Arinto dos Açores is way more productive. And at that time, the Verdelho wine, which was a style of wine, not the grape, the Verdelho wine was being sold by the liter. So if you produce 1,000 in my vineyard, if I change to Arinto dos Açores, if I produce 2,000, it's money coming in. Yeah. So there's no doubt. So more than 90% of Criação Velha took down the old Verdelho. That's why my dad was the biggest owner of old Verdelho. Well, if I say in Pico, I have to say in the world, because this is the place that we have more Verdelho, of this Verdelho in the world. So, and now I'm the biggest owner of old Verdelho in Pico. Okay, and that's why I produce a different wine.
Czar Wine, as it's been called by Forbes, a crazy wine that's worth a trip to Pico. Fortunato explains why producing this wine requires a bit of madness.
I have the articles coming on the crazy wine from Forbes. Now I just had BBC calling it the impossible wine, which I like the description, the
absolutely.
impossible wine, because according to all of the enology books, this is not possible to happen. Because this is like a crazy way of producing wine. So one reason, in Criação Velha, the old vineyards, you produce about 2,000, 2,500 kilograms per hectare, which is a very low production. To produce my Czar, I produce about 400 kilograms per hectare, which is insane. For example, for you guys to have an idea, I don't have 2010, 2012, 2016, 2017, and 2018. So in this decade, I have 5 years without Czar. So again, only on good weather condition years.
By the way, what you in those years you don't produce the Czar? What you do with the grapes?
No, I have the wine.
You don't produce every
No.
year the
No,
Czar.
because it doesn't reach the quality to become a Czar. But I
Exactly.
have wine.
Okay.
No,
I thought
I
you
have
owned it.
wine. No. The only thing that I don't have is the Czar.
Okay.
And every time I touch my wine to correct whatever it needs to be corrected, it's not a Czar anymore. So again, you can take my Czar anywhere because it's a total natural grape juice. When I add something to my wine, can be correcting acidity, can be correct a little bit of alcohol content to be more balanced. That's it. It won't be a Czar anymore because I touched it. So the Czar is a totally natural grape juice, and that's it. And that's why it's reaching the levels that it's reaching, because it doesn't come out every year. Once, when it appears in a market, it's not even 1,000 bottles a year, the years that I have Czar, which is insane. So the only way to continue to produce this wine, it's that it has to reach the premium market of wines. And so my latest release, it's that one right there. So the 2013, which is being sold for 500 euros a bottle, which most of the people that come to this adega tells me that it's not expensive enough to reach the premium wine world. Actually, most of the people, especially outside Portugal, they tell me that it's not expensive enough.
No,
if you have a unique wine in the world that it's considered unique, good marketing about your wine, saying that it's unique and sell it for just 500. So it makes sense.
Fortunato is also working to receive a designation for Czar to be called a passado wine, instead of being a licorice wine. For a wine to naturally reach 20% of alcohol content without being fortified by any spirit, that's pretty special.
This is going to be a great possibility to be called Pico Passado wine. Everybody commenting on the 17th, 18th, and the 19th century commenting about the Pico Passado wine. Okay, so I think we have a great opportunity to have a designation. Well, having a designation maybe because the only place in the island that can produce this, at least so far, is Criação Velha.
He then showed us one of his prized possessions, the last remaining bottle of 2009.
One barrel of 2009 at Divis, right? And so I bottled it separately, and I only had enough when I reached the idea of putting this on the bottle. I only had enough for 75 of these. Okay, that's why it was 1,500 euros, the last bottles, not the first ones, because this is a 20.6 Garrett gold engravement.
2009.
Yeah, and it's written not fortified on the label. And this is the first known wine in the world that naturally reached 20%. So the first known wine. I don't know if this has happened before in Pico Passado wines, but the truth is that it's the first known wine. Being that it's, according to the all in all enology books, impossible to happen. That's why I priced it. I decided to produce this bottle and really, ask the price up. So I started with 980. In 10 days, I sold 24 bottles. So I priced it to 1,200.
Congratulations.
Yes, to 1,200. In 3 months, I priced it to 1,500. And I stopped selling, and not even in 6 months, I had everything sold out.
We began to taste some of the Czar wines, and the results were heavenly, with a great complexity and character that's unparalleled from any wines on this island, or in the world for that matter.
When everybody talks about my Czar, especially now the 2013, they say this is a fine, sexy wine, which is an incredible description of my wine.
Absolutely.
Being fine, well, you just put it on the top of the wines right away. Being sexy, I think it was amazing. Do you see the nose? So what you have is just old French oak. That's why the nuts are all there. nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then nothing else from the wood. Okay. Then what you have is, the molasses or the honey, of course, if it's made with raisins.
Yeah, of course.
A lot of people compare with dry figs, which, okay, I accept because it comes from the raisins as well, from the figs.
Yeah.
So I accept that honey thing that the figs also have to. You feel everything in your mouth, okay? And then you have a round ball in your mouth, so nothing, there's no edges. So the acidity, it's perfectly balanced. The alcohol, which this one is 19.2. So the alcohol, it's so well blended around all of these things that you feel everything in your mouth, and then when you swallow, everything goes together.
This unfortified singular wine, so-called a phenomenon of nature by a wine critic, must be preserved and saved, as there's nothing else like it in the world. At the end of this Pico trip, we were admittedly blown away by the distinctiveness of this island, taking away the experience that we've had, the stories that we've learned here, how life can survive and succeedingly prosper even in the rawest and most austere of environments. Life has defied the many enduring elements in this island, and therefore life in Pico is a story of tenacity and adaptation. To adapt to a place despite the odds, to cultivate vines and lava rocks and turn wine into the greatest wealth this island possesses, I believe that took more than just a miracle, but one of sheer bloody will and determination of the people here to survive and thrive. In itself, Pico is a gift of nature, and this tiny volcanic island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean is, subsequently, a precious gift to the world.